Welcome to Coffee Break. Thoughtful conversations for a busy world. Let's begin.
If you reach the end of your life and you realize you were never the villain in anyone's story well, you haven't succeeded.
Right. Not at all.
You haven't won at the game of human interaction. You've actually failed.
Yeah, you've lived a lie.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are really thrilled you're joining us today because our mission right now is to completely dismantle a behavior that most of us have been taught to view as this ultimate virtue.
Oh, absolutely. It's so ingrained.
Right. And today we are working with a source that is incredibly brief, but honestly, it is philosophically devastating for you to hear.
Devastating is the right word, yeah.
We aren't looking at some giant textbook today. We are unpacking a single hyper-concentrated title and its subtitle from today's notes. And those are the moral burden of universal approval and the moral burden of trying to please everyone.
It is a really remarkable piece of text, honestly.
Yeah, it really is.
Because those few words, they just instantly diagnose this sickness in modern society. We are dealing with the absolute necessity of being disliked.
Which sounds crazy, right?
It does. But specifically, it's the necessity of being disliked for the right reasons.
Yeah.
If you are operating under the assumption that a successful life is one where you manage to, just keep everyone happy.
Which most of us do.
Exactly. But if that's you, this text is a brutal wake-up call.
Okay, let's unpack this because right from the jump, framing universal approval as a negative, as a literal burden, it feels almost offensive to our cultural programming.
Oh, people hate hearing it at first.
I mean, we are actively socialized to be good, right? And in our modern vernacular, being good is just completely entangled with being agreeable or, being liked.
It's basically a synonym now. Good equals liked.
Right. So for anyone listening right now who prides themselves on being a peacemaker or someone who struggles deeply with people-pleasing, which is a lot of us, we're essentially looking at a total paradigm shift.
We really are.
We're putting a target on the back of the very survival mechanism they've used their entire lives.
Which is exactly why we need to dig into the underlying mechanics of what this source is actually claiming. We can't just look at this as a surface-level self-help platitude about learning to say no.
Right. It's way deeper than just saying no.
Much deeper. The author didn't call people-pleasing an annoying psychological quirk or a mild boundary issue. They specifically chose the words moral burden.
Yeah, that phrasing is so intentional.
It really is. That elevates the behavior from a simple bad habit to an actual ethical failure.
I want to stop right there and just dig into that specific word, moral.
Let's do it.
Because on the surface, that feels like a massive escalation. Usually when we talk about morality, we're talking about avoiding harm, being charitable, contributing to the social fabric.
Sure, the big societal rules.
Yeah. So why is the source classifying the act of trying to keep the peace and make people happy as a moral issue?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at what people-pleasing actually is structurally.
Yeah.
When your primary objective in any interaction shifts from acting with internal integrity to managing the other person's perception of you, you are inherently acting deceptively.
Whoa. Okay, so it's a lie.
It is. Morality, at its core, relies on truth, right? It relies on humans engaging with one another authentically.
Right.
So when you shapeshift to match the expectations of the person standing in front of you,
Like agreeing with an opinion you don't actually hold.
Exactly. Agreeing with opinions you don't hold, suppressing your actual needs, laughing at jokes you don't find funny. You're essentially running a covert disinformation campaign.
A disinformation campaign. I love that. You're basically feeding them false data about who you are.
Precisely. You are depriving the world and that specific person of your actual reality.
Which is pretty unfair to them, actually.
It's incredibly unfair. It's a lie of omission when you bite your tongue, and it's a lie of commission when you actively mirror a stance you fundamentally oppose.
Wow.
And philosophically speaking, a life built on a foundation of constant low-grade deception is a moral failure.
Because you aren't being real with anyone.
Right. You are treating the other person not as an equal partner in reality, but as a variable to be managed.
That is a harsh but necessary way to frame it. You're saying people-pleasing is essentially a form of covert control.
That's exactly what it is.
You're trying to manipulate their emotional state so that you can feel safe.
Exactly. It is a transaction disguised as a gift.
A transaction disguised as a gift. Okay, but let me challenge that logic for a second.
Sure.
Because if I'm listening to this, I'm probably thinking, wait, society literally needs cooperation.
Of course.
If we don't police our behavior and try to accommodate each other, society just breaks down into a completely feral state where everyone is just barking their unfiltered demands at each other.
Total chaos, right?
Yeah. So how do we separate basic necessary human kindness and politeness from this toxic moral burden the source is warning us about?
That is the crucial question. And it comes down to the neurobiology of the motivation and the presence of internal boundaries.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, basic human kindness is an outward expression of a secure internal state. When you hold a door open, or say, help a colleague with a project,
You're doing it because you want to.
right, you are doing it from a place of abundance. It aligns with your values, and crucially, it does not compromise your identity or drain your essential reserves.
She feels good.
Exactly. Your brain registers this as a pro-social, rewarding act. You get a little hit of dopamine. People-pleasing, however, is driven by the brain's threat detection system.
Oh, wow. So it's a survival response, not a generous one.
Correct. When we perceive social disapproval, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex in our brain lights up.
The dorsal, wait, what does that part of the brain do?
It's actually the exact same region that processes physical pain.
You're kidding? Physical pain.
I'm serious. Evolutionarily speaking, for early humans, being disliked by the tribe meant being exiled.
And being exiled meant you freeze or starve. Death.
Exactly. So our brains evolved to view social rejection as a literal physical threat to our survival.
So when somebody is mildly annoyed with me at the office, my brain thinks a saber-toothed tiger is about to eat me.
Yes. Your nervous system cannot tell the difference. So when you engage in the moral burden of people-pleasing, you are actually engaging in a trauma response known as fawning.
Fawning. Like fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Precisely. You are abandoning your own boundaries to pacify a perceived threat. You are being kind. You are negotiating for your life.
That distinction changes everything.
It really does.
Because genuine kindness leaves you feeling fulfilled, since it's an authentic expression of your values. But fawning or people-pleasing leaves you feeling completely hollowed out.
Hollowed out, resentful, and utterly exhausted.
Because you just spent massive amounts of energy running this complex psychological defense program.
Exactly.
Which brings us perfectly to the second word in that phrase from the source, birding. We aren't just talking about a moral failure here. We're talking about a crushing weight.
And that weight is actually measurable.
Really? How so?
In physiology, there is this concept called allostatic load. It's basically the cumulative wear and tear on the body and brain caused by chronic stress.
Okay.
So when you are carrying the moral burden of universal approval, your cognitive load is constantly maxed out.
Because you're always on high alert.
Right. You are perpetually scanning your environment, reading microexpressions, trying to anticipate what the group wants. And then, and this is the exhausting part, frantically rewriting your own code in real time to execute that specific persona.
It makes me think of an analogy, actually.
Clear.
Chasing universal approval is like trying to write a single software algorithm that is mandated to optimize for maximum battery life, but also maximum screen brightness simultaneously.
Right, that was good, yeah.
You are programming your brain with inherently contradictory operating parameters. The system just crashes.
It has to crash.
You end up with total decision paralysis because no matter what output the algorithm generates, it violates one of its core directives.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. And you see the system crash all the time in modern life.
Where do we see it the most?
Look at the phenomenon decision paralysis among high achievers. When you carry this burden, making even a relatively simple choice like picking a career path, setting a company policy, or even, deciding where to spend the holidays.
Oh, the holiday one is so real.
Right. It becomes a terrifying ordeal. Because your internal algorithm is programmed to achieve zero disappointment, you literally cannot make a move.
Because you can't please everyone.
Exactly. If you choose option A, you disappoint this faction of the family. If you choose option B, you alienate that group of friends.
So the algorithm just endlessly loops without ever executing a command. You just freeze.
You freeze, and you end up letting circumstances or more dominant personalities make the decisions for you.
You just give up your power.
You abdicate your agency entirely to escape the responsibility of being the one who caused the disappointment. The burden of anticipating everyone else's emotional reaction completely crushes your ability to steer your own life.
And stepping back, if we realize we are voluntarily carrying this immense, biologically exhausting burden, we have to look at the objective we are carrying it for, right?
We do.
We are enduring all this cognitive dissonance for a specific prize, and the source text names that prize: universal approval and pleasing everyone.
What's fascinating here is the absolute mathematical trap hidden inside the words universal and everyone.
A mathematical trap.
Yes. When we look at this through the lens of systems theory or game theory, the pursuit of universal approval isn't just difficult, it is a structural impossibility.
Because human values are essentially a zero-sum game in many contexts.
Right. There is no single monolithic standard for what is pleasing.
Human desires are just constantly in opposition.
Exactly. They are inherently and constantly clashing. Like, to please person A, you might need to exhibit a specific set of traits. Let's say person A deeply values strict adherence to tradition, conservative pacing, and quiet compliance.
Okay, so a very rigid rule follower type.
Right. To secure their approval, you must embody those things. But right next to them is person B. And person B values radical disruption, constant innovation, questioning authority, and speaking loudly.
A total maverick.
Exactly.
Okay.
It is physically and logically impossible to simultaneously embody quiet compliance and radical disruption.
You can't be both.
You cannot.
Yeah.
Therefore, the very act of gaining person A's approval guarantees the loss of person B's approval.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If the pursuit of universal approval is a built-in paradox, an unwinnable game, what happens to the person who just refuses to stop playing it?
It's a dark path.
It seems to me that the relentless attempt to please everyone guarantees that you will actually please no one deeply.
Not even yourself.
Right, not even yourself, because in the attempt to satisfy all those contradictory variables, your core identity just gets entirely watered down.
You lose your definition.
Yeah.
You lose the specific edges that make you a distinct individual.
Like trying to mix every single color of paint together on a palette.
Oh, exactly.
You think you're going to get this beautiful, universally appealing rainbow, but you actually just end up with a muddy, indistinct, forgettable gray.
Yes. If your primary goal is to avoid offending the traditionalist while simultaneously not boring the disruptor, you have to adopt a state of absolute neutrality.
You just become gray.
You become a psychological chameleon, but a chameleon that has completely forgotten its resting color.
It's worse than that, though, because a chameleon changes color to survive, but it still has a physical form. The person chasing universal approval actually starts to erase their own form.
What do you mean?
Well, you are trying to be the perfect puzzle piece for every single puzzle in the world, which means you eventually have to sand off all your own unique edges until you are just a smooth, featureless blank.
A blank piece.
Yeah, you fit everywhere, but you belong nowhere.
That is the ultimate tragedy of this burden.
Yeah.
If your sole operating protocol in life is just to avoid rocking the boat, to just blend into the background, you ultimately contribute nothing original to the human ecosystem.
You're just taking up space.
You are consuming resources, but you aren't generating any unique value. You become a passive mirror, reflecting whatever light is shown onto you, but generating no light of your own.
And the fear of generating that light, the fear of casting a shadow, is what keeps us trapped. We think that by sanding off our edges, we are protecting ourselves.
We think we're safe.
We think, if I am completely neutral, no one can point at me and say, I am wrong.
But the irony is that by choosing that featureless existence to avoid external disapproval, you generate massive internal self-loathing.
Because you know you're faking it.
You do.
Yeah.
You avoid the immediate sting of social friction, but you trade it for a chronic, lifelong ache of knowing you were hiding. Down in your neurobiology, that you were living a fraction of the life you were meant to live.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because if we follow the logical progression of the source text, we reach an unavoidable conclusion. We establish that the moral burden of people-pleasing is a form of deceptive, exhausting fawning.
Right.
We establish mathematically that universal approval is a complete myth.
Yes.
So, if universal approval is impossible, the logical conclusion is that disapproval is a mathematical certainty. You cannot avoid it.
It is a fixed variable in the equation. No matter what you do, someone, somewhere will disapprove.
Exactly. Therefore, if disapproval is inevitable, our goal shouldn't be to avoid it. Our goal must be to choose how and why we are disapproved of.
We have to pick our battles.
We have to take control of the narrative. And this brings us to the core thesis of our deep dive today. The absolute necessity of consciously embracing the villain role in someone else's story.
This is where the philosophy meets the hard pavement of reality.
It gets real right here.
It does.
Yeah.
Shedding the burden we've been talking about is an active, often painful process. When you stop fawning, when you stop standing off your edges, and you start living authentically, you will inevitably displease someone.
It's going to happen.
You will frustrate their plans. You will disappoint their expectations.
Yeah.
And because human beings naturally view their own lives through a subjective, egocentric lens where they are the protagonist.
Everyone is the star of their own movie.
Right. Your refusal to comply with their wishes will inherently cast you in the role of the antagonist. You become the villain.
I think we need to be really precise about what we mean by villain here, though, because the word is so loaded with, like, cinematic baggage.
Sure, it sounds evil.
When we hear villain, we picture malice. We picture someone actively plotting to cause harm. But that's not what the source implies, is it?
Not at all.
Being the villain in the context of authenticity doesn't mean you are acting maliciously. It simply means your authentic choices, your boundaries, or your truth happen to create structural opposition to someone else's desires or conveniences.
It is entirely about structural opposition. Let's look at the mechanics of setting a boundary, which is the ultimate test of this concept.
Let's do it.
If you have spent years operating under the moral burden of people-pleasing, you have actively trained the people around you to expect endless compliance.
You've taught them how to treat you.
Exactly. You have provided them with a boundless, frictionless resource of your time, your energy, and your emotional labor. They have built whole ecosystems that rely on your lack of boundaries.
You've been subsidizing their comfort with your sanity.
Precisely. Now, the moment you recognize this burden and decide to set a healthy boundary, let's say you tell a demanding client you no longer answer emails on weekends.
Oh, they love that.
Or you tell a family member you won't participate in their toxic gossip anymore. What happens?
They freak out.
They do. To the person who is entirely benefiting from your lack of boundaries, your new boundary does not feel like self-care. It feels like an unprovoked attack.
Right.
It feels like a deprivation of resources. Because you are disrupting a system that worked perfectly well for them, you instantly become the villain in their subjective narrative. They will call you selfish. They will say you are being difficult.
And if you are still running that old universal approval algorithm, being called selfish is a system-critical error.
Sirens are going off in your head.
The dorsal anterior cingulate cortex flares up, you feel the panic of social rejection, and you immediately cave. You drop the boundary and apologize just to stop being the villain.
And you pick the crushing burden right back up.
Yeah.
But if you understand the source text, you realize that you must tolerate the biological discomfort of being their villain.
Yeah.
You have to sit with the friction.
Just let them be mad.
Exactly. Another profound example of this is speaking a difficult truth. When you choose to speak an honest truth in a room full of people who are comfortably benefiting from a shared delusion or a comfortable lie, you will be deeply resented.
Because you threaten the structural integrity of their worldview.
You become the agitator.
But you are being disliked for the right reason.
Yes, you are prioritizing integrity over social comfort. And here is the harsh, ultimate metric for authenticity.
Okay, lay it on us.
If you look back at your life and realize that you have never been the villain in anyone's story, it means you have never truly set a boundary.
Wow.
It means you have never stood up for a conviction when it was unpopular. It means you have never prioritized your own internal compass over someone else's convenience. In short, if you were never the villain, you have never lived authentically.
That is a staggering realization. If you are never the villain, you are just a prop in other people's plays.
A background extra.
But I have to push back here because there is a dangerous trap hidden inside this liberation.
Oh, for sure. What are you thinking?
I can hear a certain type of listener taking this concept, twisting it, and using it to justify terrible behavior.
Yes, the brutally honest crowd.
Right. How do we ensure we understand the difference between being disliked for the right reasons, like authenticity and boundary setting, versus just acting like a complete jerk and weaponizing the phrase living authentically?
It happens all the time.
We see this online constantly. People are cruel, they refuse to compromise, they bulldoze others, and then proudly declare, I'm just living my truth, I don't care if I'm the villain.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about.
So where's the line between shedding the moral burden and just being fundamentally toxic?
That is the most critical distinction to make, and it relies entirely on examining the internal motivation behind the action. The difference lies in whether your actions are rooted in core values or in ego.
Values versus ego. Okay.
Being disliked for the right reasons is fundamentally defensive. It is about protecting your inner citadel. When you set a boundary, you are not doing it to punish the other person.
Right.
You aren't doing it to exert dominance or to cause pain. You are doing it to protect your own finite resources. Your focus is entirely internal.
Okay, so authenticity is protective, not aggressive.
Correct. When you speak a difficult truth authentically, you do it because the truth is necessary for genuine connection or ethical alignment. You don't do it because you enjoy watching the other person squirm.
That makes sense.
Now, contrast that with the person who uses authenticity as a shield for being a jerk. The jerk's behavior is ego-driven and offensively oriented.
Do you want to cause a reaction?
Yes. It is rooted in a desire to dominate, to cause friction for the sake of feeling powerful, or just an arrogant lack of empathy for others.
Yeah.
The jerk actually enjoys the fallout. They seek the villain role to feed their narcissism.
Let me test that theory with an example.
Go for it.
It's the difference between saying, I can't lend you money because I need to ensure my own family's financial stability, which is a healthy, protective boundary that might still make you the villain to the person asking.
Right. They still might be mad.
Versus saying, I won't lend you money because you're lazy and make pathetic choices, which is just an ego-driven attack.
Exactly.
Both might result in you being cast as the villain, but only one is rooted in the moral integrity the source is pointing toward.
That is the perfect illustration. The authentic person accepts the villain role as an unfortunate, uncomfortable, but necessary byproduct of maintaining their structural integrity.
They don't love it, but they accept it.
Right. The jerk actively pursues the villain role to assert dominance. You must ruthlessly examine your own motives. Are you saying no to protect your peace, or are you saying no to wield power?
That's a great gut check for anyone listening. And what happens when we get that balance right? If we connect this to the bigger picture, what is the actual reward for taking on this difficult work?
The payoff is huge.
We've talked about the pain of the burden, the impossibility of the math, and the friction of the villain role. What is waiting on the other side?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the reward is an unimaginable level of psychological freedom.
Freedom.
The source explicitly calls it a burden, right? When you finally look at the impossible algorithm of universal approval and say, I am opting out of this calculation, that massive, crushing weight is lifted off your neurology.
You can just breathe again.
You stop scanning the room to figure out who you're supposed to be. Your allostatic load drops. Your nervous system finally regulates.
You reclaim all that wasted processing power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you suddenly have the energy and the bandwidth to discover what you actually value, what you actually believe, and who you actually are beneath the fawning responses.
Which is pretty exciting.
Once you deeply, fully accept that you will be misunderstood and disliked by some people, simply by virtue of existing as a defined individual, you become virtually untouchable.
Because they can't threaten you with rejection anymore.
Precisely. The fear of rejection loses its leverage over you because you have already factored rejection into your baseline reality.
It's like realizing that friction is just a necessary part of driving a car.
That's a good way to put it.
Once you stop trying to invent a frictionless road, which is impossible, you can actually steer the vehicle. You stop fighting the fundamental laws of physics.
You stop fighting the reality of human nature. You allow people to have their subjective reactions. You allow them to be disappointed.
It's their right to be disappointed.
It is. You allow them to cast you as the villain in their narrative, recognizing that you have absolutely no control over their narrative anyway.
You really don't.
You resign your self-appointed position as the emotional manager of the universe, and you take up the much more vital job of governing yourself.
Resigning as the emotional manager of the universe, that is exactly what this deep dive has been building toward.
It's a great resignation letter to write.
It really is. We started with two brief, potent phrases from our notes. The moral burden of universal approval and the moral burden of trying to please everyone.
Yes.
And by unpacking the psychology, the evolutionary biology, and the systems theory behind those words, we've fundamentally reframed how we should view our social interactions.
We move from viewing people-pleasing as this harmless virtue to recognizing it as a deceptive, physically exhausting trauma response.
Which is huge.
And we prove that universal approval is a mathematical impossibility that only results in the complete erasure of your identity.
And most importantly, we learned that to step out of that erasure, you have to be willing to cause friction. You have to be willing to set the boundaries that disrupt someone else's comfortable ecosystem.
You do.
You have to accept the necessity of being disliked for the right reasons.
Because occupying your own space in the world requires displacing the expectations of others.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, which we specifically curated to challenge everything you've been taught about the necessity of being liked, we want to leave you with one final, lingering thought.
A parting gift.
We've spent this entire time dissecting the danger of trying to please everyone else and the fear of being the villain in their eyes.
But consider this: when you continuously bend, compromise, and break your own boundaries, just to ensure that you are never the villain in anyone else's story, do you eventually, inevitably, become the villain in your own?
That is the question to carry with you. If you spend your whole life writing code to satisfy everyone else's algorithm, you are the one who has to live inside the crashed system.
Don't do it to yourself.
Don't let the crowd dictate your operating parameters. Take back the controls. Live authentically, even if it means wearing the villain's cape every now and then. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.
Thanks for spending this time with us on Coffee Break. If this conversation stayed with you, you can find more episodes here on the channel. Until next time, take care.